Let's go. Mack Malone, he's your KC journalist. The truth. Mack Malone, he's your KC journalist. Mack Malone, he's your KC journalist. And now you get the best from your KC journalist. Let's go.
What's the deal, everybody? This is your boy Mack Malone, the KC journalist, and today we are in Riverside, Missouri. Now, although Riverside wasn't founded until 1951, the city was inhabited as far back as 6,000 years ago. There have been many historical events that have happened here. I mean, we could talk about Edward Young, Red X, the flood of 93, St. Matthew's Church, Renner Brenner. I grew up around this area. There used to be a racetrack back here too, but today we are going to look back on the Nebo Hill people, the Hopewell Indians, and the prehistoric era of life in Riverside. We're going to go up to the post office and touch on the Nebo Hill people and show you where a large concentration of artifacts were found. And then we're going to head to the Renner Brenner Park and go to the locations of where some of the burial mounds were located. Now, years ago, Norman and Irene Jones discovered land in the hills overlooking downtown Riverside, and Norman started digging a foundation for the house, and what he uncovered was the remains of an Indian. He dug up the remains of an Indian who had the arrow still in the back of his head. He had been buried sitting up, and they took the remains to Park University. They started noticing the mounds on their 20 acres all over the land, and the area eventually became known as Indian Hills. Rightfully so, and the Indian they found was approximately 200 years old. So he was not the same as the Hopewells. The Hopewells came long before that. And here we are at the post office in Riverside. Now, archaeological evidence suggests that the Nebo Hill people were one of the earliest inhabitants of Riverside, between 4,000 and 5,000 BC. This early archaic culture lived mostly up on the high bluffs and hills along the Missouri River. The most substantial and collective artifacts of the Nebo Hill people were recovered right here and around and at this post office, right here where I'm at right now off of Gateway. These hills behind it was once a drive-in, and the Nebo Hill people roamed this entire area. But the most substantial and biggest collective of artifacts that they ever found was right here where I'm standing. So if you go up over this cliff to the east, you would have seen acres and acres of mounds stretching out all across Indian Hills and Briarcliff. This is what the first European settlers saw when they first got here. Now, the burials took place in earth mounds on the highest bluffs to the east, and what is now known as Renner Brenner Park. The largest one was on the bluff next to where the city hall and the police station is. That particular mound was 60 feet in diameter, 20 feet tall. It was containing an amount of at least 20 bodies. Due to residential development and the growth of the city, all of them have been destroyed. Now, there were 7 main groups with 24 mounds or more, and it filled these hills all around Riverside. Archaeologists reported finding as many as 25 bodies in the largest mound. Now, some of the smaller mounds, they had vaults in them, like I explained previously, while the larger ones were all earth. But some evidence suggests some of the vaults were used to cremate the remains as well as bury them. But across from Renner Brenner Park, up on that hill, them apartments up on the hill right behind the city hall, that was a big mound up there that they recovered all them bodies from. That was the largest mound in this area. And here we are at the corner of Northwest Indian Lane and Northwest Woodland Avenue. On this corner right here in front of me and going down this street to the left were 5 mounds. Now, back then this corner probably looked something like this. Now, 3 of these mounds were earth mounds, where the dead and the artifacts are buried in the dirt of the hill. The other 2 were stone vaults. Now, on the outside they look just like the others, but when you excavate them, there's a stone vault built into the bottom containing the corpses and everything buried in there. There were a total of 25 mounds right here in Riverside, with a total of 50 stretching throughout all through Southern Clay and Platte County, The stone vaults definitely outnumbered the earth mounds, excavated by 5 different archaeologists between 1878 and 1934. The mounds are on the east and the west, through Indian Hills and Briar Cliff, all the way up High Drive in the hills on the other side in Riverside. Tons of bodies were pulled out of this street right here. They laid here undisturbed for thousands of years until modern Indians and bushwhackers used to come through and try to raid the mounds, and eventually urban development just leveled everything that was left. All right, so now we just went right around the corner to Northwest Pawnee Court, Northwest Valley Lane, and this is the site of 3 mounds. This is what it would have looked like. Now on this corner in front of me, you would have seen 2 earth mounds to the left and 1 vault to the right. And right here, like I said, they all were earth mounds, but the vaults were concrete foundations built inside the mound. Several skulls, skeletons, and prehistoric artifacts were discovered right here. There were 3 that sat right here. Let's go to the next one. Now these are all so close together. We turn another corner and we are now at Palisades Drive and Northwest Scenic View Road, where 3 vaults sat in front of me, right about where that stone wall is, right there in the middle. And more skeletons and pieces were pulled out of these. You know, it really bothers me that all of these were torn down and all the graves of these ancient souls were just bulldozed and discarded. There were so many more mounds. However, this will be the last location I visit in this video. And now we are going to go to a spot behind Corner Cafe where there were 3 ceremonial dance circles. And then we will end the video at Renner Brenner Site Park. So let's go look at this field and imagine an Indian ceremony taking place in prehistoric times. But right here, 3 other mounds that had vaults. The concrete vaults in the middle, these were all vaults. They've been lost in history and just torn down. Now here we are behind the Corner Cafe in Riverside, Missouri. Now this sits at the corner of Vivian and Gateway. This field right here once was sacred land and was the location of the ceremonial grounds that had 3 dancing circles inside of it. Back then, this field probably looked something like this. And it was used for a variety of purposes. The Hopewell Indians used to gather right here in the 3 circles that they created right here in this field, and they would do rituals, share news, pray, trade goods, worship. I mean, they would hold significant ceremonies. They danced in these 3 circles and celebrated different events or what have you. But there was probably a fire pit burning that they danced around or just kept nearby. I just imagine a whole village standing right here in a circle holding rituals. I mean, that is just fascinating. As I look around, it's crazy. The Renner village is just a couple hundred feet to the right of this field. I'm really happy that they didn't build on this land, and I'm even more amazed that the field is still here after 3,000 years. I mean, despite all the development that's taken place here in this area. But the Renner Hopewells would trade with other civilizations that would travel here via the Missouri River. And they probably met here. Rituals such as astrological events, moon events, seasonal changes, and significance, they were all celebrated right here. And this is the Renner Village site. It says this area was frequented by prehistoric people as early as 5000 BC. This site is best known as the regional center of Aboriginal population in Hopewell times, AD 1 to 500, and occupied throughout the woodland culture in the middle Mississippian times, 1200 AD, discovered in 1921. The property of Mr. and Mrs. L.R. Renner, in recognition of its outstanding significance to encourage its preservation. This property has been placed on the National Register of Historic Places 1969. All right, so we end this story here at Renner Brenner Site Park. Now, over the last 100 years, archaeologists have found artifacts and evidence of the Hopewell and Middle Mississippian. Right here between the junction of Line Creek and the Missouri River. Those stones that were used to build the vaults inside the mounds were pulled from this wall right here across from Red X. And they were carried as far as a mile, one by one. They carried these stones all the way to where the mounds were. Now, Waldo Weddell of the U.S. National Museum was the first one to excavate in 1937. And he discovered different pottery styles and things that were typical of the Hopewell. And then in 1954, the Kansas City Archaeological Society excavated it. And then the third time, Gary Brenner excavated it from 1980 to 1993. And I actually lived across the street at Greystone in the 80s. And I remember seeing the tape and the mounds of dug up dirt over at the park. I remember that. And I heard an unusual but fascinating fact about Gary Brenner and this site as well. During his excavation period in 1986, he dug down in this hole right here and discovered an 8-inch copper pin. Now, as he was cleaning this pin, unknowing to him, a dormant enzyme known as the King Tut's disease, I'm not sure of the actual name, but it was scrubbed off into the air and he inhaled it into his lungs. And once it hit the water and air in his lungs, it reactivated. And 4 hours later, he was in ICU with all his organs shutting down on the brink of death, urinating blood and everything. It's crazy. By the grace of God, he survived, though. And he is only one of 5 documented survivors of the disease. That's wild to think about, you know. But tens of thousands of stone and bone artifacts were found here and all throughout Riverside. Lots of evidence that different eras of Native Americans lived here for thousands of years during the archaic periods. 4,000 to 5,000 BC, the Nebo Hill people lived here on the bluffs of the Missouri River. And then the black sand culture in 1000 BC, and they were known and named for their use of different elements in their pottery. And then the Hopewell culture came after that and was the largest mound builder community west of the Mississippi in the Line Creek area around 300 BC. And so this Renner site right here was determined by archaeologists to be a massive Indian village nearly 2,500 years ago. It had the largest concentration of artifacts in the entire state of Missouri. This particular site right here was inhabited by the Hopewell Indians, mound builders. They were mound builders who constructed the largest earth structures on the hills right here, going all the way to downtown Riverside. They started out in the Ohio area and then eventually migrated to southern Illinois and eventually made their way to Riverside in this area up here. But what's crazy about them is the bow and arrow had not even been invented yet. And they didn't have horses, so they walked or they traveled by water everywhere they went. And that's what's crazy. And despite all of that, there was an extensive trade network. That's what they were known for. Ohio, Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan, Florida, all the way up to west to the Rocky Mountains, all the way. The copper from Wisconsin they were getting obsidian from the Rockies, seashells from Florida. They mainly, lived on white-tailed deer, fox, wolf, coyote, beaver, and a lot of the other animals that exist today that you see. Even a few bear bones have been found at this site. Isn't that wild? Bears in Riverside, imagine that. But they were skilled, crafty hunters despite not having bows. To the east and the west of this park were the mounds. And here's a fun fact. I actually performed in this park way back in the 90s before the park was here. There was a stage out here. And they had a festival going on and I knew the DJ. So I got on and did a song. It was pretty cool. And you can just feel the history out here. What's even crazier is they found all those artifacts, but they only excavated 10% of this park. Imagine that. Imagine what else is still buried right here. That fascinates me. Eventually, what we know as modern day Indians, like you see on TV, the cowboys and the Indians, would roam Missouri as well. Era after era of natives going all the way back to prehistoric times resided right here. Several different tribes and civilizations lived right here. It's fascinating stuff, man. I used to play in this park as a kid and I never really understood where I was. Where I was standing on, but man, that's cool. This video has been a lot of fun, but it's been long enough. It's gonna be like 14-15 minutes or something like that. But this is your boy Mack Malone, the KC Journalist, signing out. Catch you on the next one. Peace.
Let's go. Mack Malone, he's your KC Journalist. Mack Malone, he's your KC Journalist. Mack Malone, he's your KC Journalist. Now go get the best from that KC Journalist.